All right, good afternoon. We have Jessica Garson here. She's a senior developer advocate with Elastic, and I will let her take it away.
Thank you so much. Hi, how's it going, everybody? I'm here to talk with you about how to do the same thing over and over and over again and yield different results. My name is Jessica Garson. I can be found on most places on the internet at Jessica Garson, and if you're interested in connecting with me on Mastodon, I'm Jessica Garson at macaw.social, and I am a senior developer advocate at Elastic. So you might be wondering, what is Elastic? Elastic is the maker of Elasticsearch, Logstash, Beats, and Kibana. We're most commonly known for our logging solutions. And anytime that you type into an internal search bar, maybe you're searching for something in Wikipedia or something like that, you're probably using us under the hood in some way, shape, or form. And this talk is less about Elastic and more about something that I do over and over and over again in my own programming, mostly in hobbyist ways, but sometimes for work, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Code and slides can be found on my GitHub, so feel free to follow along. I'll be going through a lot, and a lot of it will be mostly an introduction, but all of the core concepts, all of the resources that I point to can be found on my GitHub. So who is this talk for? This talk is for anyone who's looking to get started with automation. If you want to know more about scheduling, services, or even hobbyist developer projects, anyone who is learning how to develop. For me personally, I found the time that I wrote code, from the time that I was able to get it up on the internet doing things, to be a couple of years. And so for me, learning how to work in this way allowed me to learn how to deploy. And this is also a great talk for anyone who is looking to get into developer relations. This is kind of my secret trick. So I've won a couple of hackathons. I have also impressed my bosses when I come in, and I'm like, oh, I can just do this on a scheduler over and over and over again. And it's kind of my secret to working in developer relations. So in developer relations, we spend a lot of time, writing creative tutorials, giving talks at conferences such as this one, learning what our community is building, and how to replicate it and put ourselves in their shoes. And I was talking with a customer after I released a blog post on this, and they were like, oh yeah, I do that too. And I was like, okay, cool, I got that right. And so part of it is just if you could do the same thing over and over and over again and you could deploy it, then that gives you a lot of power. And it's also a really great way to get started with deployment. So let's talk about some scheduling basics. Also, question, who here is scheduling right now? What are you scheduling? Yeah, what kind of Python scripts? Okay, cool. I mean, that works, yeah.
Just the database backups.
Yeah, database backups. Yeah, well, anybody else? Anybody scheduling anything? What? Meetings, blog posts, yeah. So scheduling tasks is a fundamental aspect of programming. It is something that we do over and over and over again. Such as you said, database backups. Lots of different things need to be scheduled. Reports, I used to have a weekly report that would be scheduled. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was using a cron job under the hood. And I've used this similar paradigm for many of my projects where I've had to run code at a specific time interval. So I've used many different technologies, such as AP's scheduler or schedule in Python. I've used GCP Cloud Functions and Cloud Scheduler, AWS Lambda, Azure Function Apps, Railway cron jobs, Render cron jobs. I keep learning about more too. I actually, just yesterday learned about Vercel's cron job functions that they have. I learned that there is also a GitHub action, marketplace action that will do cron scheduling for you. There's probably a lot more that I can't think of, so if you know of any, just shout it out right now. Cron? Yeah, just cron. Cron tab, that's another great one. Yeah, I didn't even have that on the list. Anything else? Any other scheduling? Someone told me earlier today that Python Anywhere has this too. And cron jobs, so some of the systems I talked about were cron jobs. Some of them are serverless functions. And both are used for automating tasks. A cron job is a command that allows you to schedule tasks to run in the future. Typically, it's used to set up things that are going to happen on a regular basis, like weekly or monthly. And cron jobs kind of require a continuously running server. The first time I tried to do this, I tried to do this on my local machine. And then I was like, why does it stop when I boot down my computer? And it's because you need to have it running simultaneously. They are ideal for scheduled tasks such as backups or updates. It's really great for that. And then serverless functions are specialized programmable functions that run in a managed cloud provider's infrastructure. So they perform specific tasks without requiring you to maintain any underlying servers, which is great. There's also managed cron jobs too, which makes it all confusing, but we'll talk about that soon. And serverless functions operate in a cloud provider's managed environment, so they allow you to scale. They require no server management, which is pretty exciting. And so you might be wondering, what have you used this before in the past? I have built Twitter bots. I have built Mastodon bots, mostly things that show pictures of cats, to be really honest. How I solved my parking problem with Python was a talk that I gave at PyGotham and PyCon in 2020, which was all about how I set up this overly engineered solution to tell me when I didn't have to move my car in New York City, and it would send me a text when the words suspended and tomorrow appeared in the same tweet from the New York City government, which was really exciting, so I would know when I didn't have to move my car. And then also, I make music with code. I've spoken about this here at this great conference in the past. Really excited to be back here at PyOhio. I forgot to mention that. This is my favorite conference. I use a lot, so I make chaotic music that involves samples of my own screams. And so to add in an extra layer of chaos, I would actually have my scream samples play once a minute. And so I didn't really know when it was going to happen, and it added this extra chaotic element to my work, which was great. And I used AP Scheduler for that, if you're wondering how that happened. So what could go wrong? Why wouldn't you want to do this? So the code that you are working with can go out of date, especially if you're working with APIs. They could change. Lots of things change all the time. And the structure can change in that way. And also, you might not want to be using the same dependencies. You might have issues that just cause things to fail over time, especially if you're not thinking about it. Also, as someone who has made a lot of Twitter bots in the past, I had one that was a bot that would tweet nouns and verbs. And you might be like, okay, what could go wrong with that? Some of the noun-verb combinations that I came up with were quite spicy, and were not things that you would ever want to be publicly tweeting. And also, some of it didn't really vibe very well with the current news cycle. So my bot would say things that I would be like, oh my God, no. Or I was using an API on cat facts that would just tweet facts about cats, and sometimes it would tweet some really weird facts that were not about cats and things that were not what I wanted it to be saying. So that's just something that's important to consider. So let's talk a little bit about cron syntax. So a couple of questions that I like to ask myself is, how often do you want something to happen? When do you want something to happen? And what is the schedule that you want something to happen at? And how many people have seen this chart before? Okay, I've seen a couple of hands go up. I saw this the first time, and I was like, I have no idea what this means. I don't get it. I don't understand. And so the first one is minute, then it's hour, then it's day of month, and then the month, and then the day of the week. And this I found super confusing. And so I can show you some of the commonly used syntax that I use, which is every minute, every 8 a.m. on Wednesdays, every 12 hours. I use all of these. Are literally cut and pasted from my own scheduled cron jobs. These are ones that I use all the time. And there's a resource that I like. It's called crontab.guru. And so this is my favorite way to kind of start playing with this. So there's this example here, and I love kind of going in and being like, okay, every 15th minute. So this is every 15 minutes. What if I change this and make it 20? So now it's every 20th minute. And what if I change another one? What if I kind of come here, not that, that's not what I want to be doing, yay for live demos, and go to examples. So for here, what if I want it to be Monday through Friday? And so how I learned how to do this was literally just playing on the site until I kind of figured out what's happening under the hood. And I'm like, okay, cool. Now I know what's happening. So crontab.guru is a great, great resource that I love. So I've talked a lot about my creative examples, but let's show one. So one question that I'm always asking myself as a runner, how many people here are runners? Yeah, I'm also a runner. I never know when to go for a run. but I like to go an hour before sunset, but I never know when sunset is. So I built a solution to let me know what time I should go for a run. This uses a notification service called Pushover, which provides push notifications to your phone if you have an iOS or Android device, and it is great. And so this code is deployed using a render cron job from a private GitHub repository, and it was really simple because all I had to do was go into render's cron job service and connect it with my GitHub repository, and then I was like, okay, cool. I can actually just deploy it, and it just works, and there was like no magic under the hood, which was like kind of awesome. Yeah, it was surprising. So here I have my cron job set up here, and if I want to trigger this run, if I look at my phone, something will come up as well in about a second, letting me know that it worked. But in the meantime, so I'm not looking at my phone while talking, I can show you all the settings. So if I look under here and click where it says settings, and we actually can go in, we can see what region it's deployed to, the branch is main because it's a very, very simple solution, and we could see here that it's Python running.py, and it just installs from a requirements.txt file that only contains one requirement, requests, and it's just a very simple application, and that is not the right GitHub. Yeah, and so here is the code. This looks a little bit funny, but yeah, that looks a little bit better. But it basically just imports requests, parses the sunset time, gets the time of sunset in New York City, where I live, and then from here, it sends a pushover notification that's a post request to their API, and then it's just a very simple main function that kind of ties it all together, and from there, it just will tell me, it has a print statement just to help me debug, so it prints out pretty much anything I need, and it has the message that I get notified, and it's a super simple piece of code that helps me figure out how to stay healthy, which is wonderful. And so when I started working at Elastic, I started working with Elasticsearch for my first time in many years. And I had a problem, which is that my data in my Elasticsearch index would quickly go out of date. And I was like, oh my God, I know how to solve this. Yay, this is awesome. So you might be wondering, like, what is an index? An index in Elasticsearch is a data structure where you can store your data in documents. And those are key value structures. And each index has a mapping that defines the structure of the documents. And it's helpful for handling large volumes of data. It's a great data store for like fast search capabilities and retrieval capabilities and things like that. So because of that, a time-based solution was perfect because maintaining up-to-date data is critical, especially when dealing with like frequently changing dynamic data sets. The data set that I was originally working with was a data set about the Boston Celtics, and they kept on playing games that they were either winning or losing. And so because they were always winning or losing, it had to be up to date on a daily basis. So the data set I'm going to be talking about today is actually one of my favorite ones. It is NASA's Near-Earth Web Service, and it's a RESTful API that provides information about when asteroids are coming near Earth. Super exciting. So let's take a look at the data set in Postman. Postman is a REST client. It's really helpful for making API requests. And I find it like there's actually a way to generate code. It's kind of my starting point. Like every time I make an API request, I'll typically start in Postman. So let's send here. There's a demo key that is pretty useful. And then let me pull up so I can show you all the body and the structure of the code. Oh no, yay for live demos. But you would see, if you could see it, a large JSON object that's not very well parsed. And so I had to actually go in and do some parsing and to make it look a little bit different. But you'll see this in a couple of different ways. So we're not going to spend too much time on that. What you need to get started with this solution is Python. There is a demo API key from NASA, but it is something, and it's free. But you can also get one yourself for free. And if you're making lots of requests, I suggest that you do that. And you should probably use an Elasticsearch version higher than 8, just because that's the most modern one. I think I was using 8.14. And you'll also need to have your data loaded into your index already. If you don't already do that, you can actually create a script to create an index if one doesn't exist already. But I have a script that I've used for cleaning and things like that. And this one, that's actually, yeah, cool. So from here, It just basically imports in requests, uses pandas for some data manipulation, and then from here uses datetime just to tell me what day it is and things like that. So it connects to the NASA API, it connects to NASA, creates a data frame, and then from here we can actually start to see the data frame, get some information back, connect to Elastic, and then from here we can create an index, and then from here we can actually create a function generator, or a doc generator, to kind of take our data frame and turn it into documents, which are similar to JSON objects. And then from here, we can just see the last time that the index was updated after it's already been updated. And this helpers up bulk is where you update the data, and then from there you can see the last time it was updated. And if it needs to be updated again, then you can do that there. And it's a really simple script, but I found it useful for kind of locally testing and kind of creating that framework for myself. So, yeah, let's go back into the slideshow. So let's talk about our first solution, Google Cloud Platform. How many people have used this before? More hands than I was expecting. I see about 4 hands. It's not very widely used, and we'll talk about that soon. But I find it really a great way to kind of get started with automation, and it's a really great way to get started with like cloud deployments if you haven't done that yet. The first thing that you have to do is create a script for uploading your data, and then from there you can create a Google Cloud function, and then you can use Google Cloud Scheduler to update your index at the interval of your choosing. And so the import statement that you're going to want to put in is import functions framework, and then from here, this main function that kind of serves the same purpose as the one we saw earlier that kind of ties everything together. This one has a decorator above it that says functions framework.cloud event, and then it has this entry point that is hello pub/sub as a cloud event. I think I stole that from their template, and then from there, it just has all kind of the main functionality. And so let's actually take a look and do a little bit of a demo. So here you can see kind of where everything is here. So you can see my daily cat facts, my Celtic schedule, and then you can also see from here the NASA one. So we could force the run, and we could see that this is also scheduled for every day at 8 a.m., and it's inside of my time zone, which is kind of cool. And then we can actually take a look at the code. So if we do cloud functions from here, and we can actually take a look in here, and now, yay for live demos. I love living on the edge. Like, okay, cool. Well, the code's mostly the same and all available on my GitHub. So yeah, I might just try to refresh. Cool. Well, I can show you the code. So let's actually go in. This is my GitHub, so yeah. Let's go in here. Yay. Okay, cool. No, these are not the right ones. Cool. Anyways, you could probably find it on my GitHub. I don't want to take too much time, but it uploads every day. And then from there, also what can happen is that I can actually see and test it. So if I want to go into my Elastic console from here, if you actually kind of can go in and you can actually take a look and see that this was updated with the most recent date of yesterday, which is super exciting. So that's a little bit about how it runs under the hood. Cool. Now let's actually go back in and talk a little bit about the Azure Function app, which is another solution that I use. So I basically did the same thing over and over and over again in many different cloud providers because I wanted to see how different it was, and it was a little bit differently. It was a little bit different each time. So you can create your code locally, set up a function app in the Azure portal, and then you can use the Azure Visual Studio code editor to be guided through the steps of creating a function. I tried to do this in the front end, just like I did for GCP, and it just did not work. My function kept on just not showing up. And then I tried to use their command line application, and that also didn't work. But I was able to get it working with the Azure Visual Studio code editor. And then from there, you can kind of update your main function and deploy your function. And when I first started creating function apps, I started with the time function template and literally just adjusted it from there. I did have like one weird thing that happened, which is that the most recent version of Python that is supported is Python 3.11. And so I had to use PyEnv to basically brew install it, and then from there I can install Python 3.11 and then I had to say that I want to locally use that version of Python. And then the PyEnv, which Python, I actually had to cut and paste that path when I went into the Visual Code Studio editor. So the other thing that was a little bit weird was that the cron syntax is slightly different than what I showed on cronjob.guru. They have an extra second. So every morning at 8:30 a.m., this is running. And then, again, as I mentioned, I use the Visual Studio Code extension to create a function from my editor. So I created the function, I selected the template, I set the time interval, and then I basically pasted a link to my Python path. And then from there, I was able to update the function app.py to have my own code. And then from here, I was able to update the requirements.txt file, and I deployed my app. And inside of the Azure console, you can update your environment variables and test your code. And then from there, also, the import statement will look something like this. Here's the main function. What I thought was really cool is that you could do this straight from the decorator, so you don't have to have like Cloud Scheduler or anything different like that. And so, yeah, let me actually show you the code here. So, actually, yeah, that's cool. So here, nah, that's not the right one. Cool, 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 yay, yay for, here's actually the one for the function app. And so you can actually deploy everything right in here. And you can actually see the time version that I used. And using the Azure thing on the side, you can actually deploy everything straight from there. And it's going to be a very similar call to actually kind of go in and like see if it ran or not. So from here, if you want to see if it ran, you can actually do this Python Azure asteroid search. And you can see that this should have run yesterday as well. Cool. I'm going to try making this a little bit smaller. OK, cool. Yeah, now you can see it a little bit better. Cool. So yeah, and then inside of Azure, if we wanted to test this, what we could actually do right here is we can test this locally as well. If we press test and run, that's how we can kind of invoke a function. So yeah, pretty easy. And then the last one I wanted to talk to you all about is AWS Lambda. So again, you create your code locally, you set up a Lambda function in the AWS console, you create a folder locally that contains your Python file, you have to create a zip file. I had issues trying to get that to load. It said it was too large, even though this is a relatively small application. I set up an event bridge trigger, which is very similar to Cloud Scheduler, and then I deployed my function. And this cron scheduling is also slightly different. There's this question mark that I found a little bit confusing, but I used event bridge for the scheduling there, and it was pretty helpful. Also, you don't need a separate import statement, which is pretty cool. And I actually put this for my code actually over at the top of my function. I don't know if it needed to be, but I just did for that one. And you might be assuming that this is just like all the other ones, and you can create a requirements.txt file, and the required packages would be installed during the deployment. And the answer is actually no. So you first have to create a virtual environment and install the required packages, and then create a zip file to upload everything. And you might be like, Jess, why is pandas missing? I saw that you had that in all your other ones. Why is that missing? And the reason why is because I got an error, and I was sad. But I was able to get it working by installing the AWS SDK pandas layer to my function. And I'm not going to go through the demo just because we're a little bit short of time, but I do want to give you some key takeaways. So this is a very biased chart about the differences between the two. The advantages is that it's really easy to deploy and configure with Render. And it might not scale as well for larger projects. It is, for GCP, it's very similar to how I write code locally. I felt like it mapped the best to the way that I write, to the way that I deployed, and I didn't really have to do anything. But it's not widely as used, so if anything happens, searching for answers is pretty hard. Azure scheduling happens in the code itself, so that I thought was really, really cool, just using that decorator that I showed. However, the process of creating a function took me the longest. I tried a couple of different ways, and it didn't quite work. And it's possible that like it was something on my end, but it's also just it took me the longest. And then AWS is very widely used in the community. I do have a secret confession, which is the first time that I tried to do this. I got so scared by making the deployment zip that I was like, that's not for me. I can't do that, no. And then I found GCP to accomplish the same goal. But now that I've actually done it, it's actually not that scary. But I know that that's a little bit hard. And I did have some issues, as I noticed, but I was able to quickly resolve them based on just like what people have said on Stack Overflow. I have a couple of other guidelines. Be sure to check out the pricing for each of the technologies used. The time zone is usually UTC. However, in some cases, you might be able to adjust it. Some places actually tell you, they actually map it into Eastern time or whatever time zone that you're in. The cron syntax might be slightly different if you are, just depending on the different technologies you are using. And some services alert you when your scheduled job fails, but not all. And you may have to set up your own alerting. I have a couple of next steps. If you're using Elasticsearch, you might want to do an ingest pipeline as like a natural next step for optimizing data uploads into an index, mainly if you deal with large volumes of data or complex data transformations. All of the things that I talked about today are third parties, so you want to be mindful of data security, especially like I felt like my spidey sense went off connecting to Render, being like, I'm giving them access to my private repositories. Cool, like this is fine, I'm just going for a run, like literally, that's literally what that's for, but my spidey sense did go off, so just be sure that you're mindful of data security when you're working with third parties and posting complicated things in this way. And I'm not a security expert, but I do have a spidey sense. And developing on the size and frequency of data uploads, if you're using this for data updates, you may want to consider batching the data just to reduce the number of API calls and things like that related to performance. And my big question for y'all is, what can you schedule? What could be automated in your life? And please talk to me about that. I love talking about scheduling. The other day at work, somebody was like, hey, Jess, you know, how do we schedule our blog posts? And I was like, oh, let me show you. And we actually ended up using the GitHub Actions that we were talking about. So yeah, it's pretty cool. There's lots of fun ways to schedule. I also would love to hear about how you're deploying and like what deployment processes you use. So I'm Jessica Garson on most platforms. I love PyOhio. Thank you to the organizers. This is like my favorite conference. This was actually the first place I ever gave a talk, and I hadn't spoken in a little while. And this was like the first place that I applied to. So love this community a lot. So let me know if you have any questions on the Elastic, discuss forums, if it's Elastic related, or the community Slack channel. I'm also around on all the social media platforms. We didn't have time for all the demos that I wanted, so all of my code and slides are here. I may even post videos of me doing some of the demos if that's something that you're interested in, to the same GitHub repository as well. And thank y'all.